Now, given the fact that most of these feats, if not all, do come from novelizations, I will be showing the section as I go through it for this video on Percy Jackson. But, anyways, I kind of recognize as a content creator that I have a chance to really, make content for people that they can't find anywhere else. One of these, for example, would be power scaling videos on characters from the stories we grew up with. So I grew up with Percy Jackson, the Rick Riordan series. I read most of his books with the branch offs as well. But anyways, I went ahead, got the books online, went through for the feats, enjoyed doing the rereads, and today I've brought you a power scaling video on Percy Jackson going over his feats. If you like these kind of videos, please hit the like button. Make sure to subscribe, and if you want to see Percy in a versus battle, give me someone to put him up against. But anyways, let's get right into it. So, we saw that even without any training and just based off of raw, pure potential, Percy in base in the first book was able to snap the bone of a mythical beast. At least assuming the bone is as strong as a human bone, which is lowballing, this is insanely impressive as a metahuman feat. We once saw that Percy was able to defeat Luke in a sparring match in his first time as a swordsman. This should be a good showing of Percy's potential as a fighter. Percy gets a slight water amp as water lands on him and he beats Luke. In Lightning Thief, at one point, Luke was alleged to be the best swordsman in the last couple of centuries. Now, Percy gets such an absurd amp in a significant amount of water that he early on at his beginning of camp life, he went from getting thrashed to being able to stand against and defeat Ares' children. These kids are descendants of the god of war himself and have a natural tendency to be insanely talented warriors. Even early on in Lightning Thief, his water amps are enough that Percy can instantly heal gashes and wounds of that sort. In The Lightning Thief, Percy begins displaying his prowess as essentially a water-bending type character. Percy was able to bend water currents and control a good-sized amount of water. In Lightning Thief alone, he shows a jump in power to the point that Percy is able to bolo Ares' boar with the manipulation of water. Due to a water amp and his body's ability to seemingly take over in intense combat for Percy, almost like Ultra Instinct from Dragon Ball, we saw that Percy was able to stand against the likes of the God of War himself. Due to raw power and his potential, Percy was able to briefly hold his own in this exchange. A surprise attack and the subsequent explosion didn't really have any effect on Percy later on in different stories. In just the brief time between books 1 and 2, Percy had sprouted skill-wise to become a rumored top duelist as a swordsman in the last several centuries. In Sea of Monsters, we see that Percy has the strength to literally brawl the sea. The amount of power needed to manhandle a sea-sized body of water is insane just to imagine. In Sea of Monsters, Percy shows he's actually capable of using water to massively amp his speed in combat. A semi-bloodlusted Percy was physically capable of brawling with a nearly 20-foot tall Cyclops and was actually able to cause physical damage with his strikes. In the next novel, we see that Percy's physical attributes have exponentially grown and that his anger is now a certified amp. Percy gets mad and stands up and tanks a large, concentrated lightning bolt point blank to the chest. Percy took 0 damage from this, which is very impressive. Percy reveals he can literally see a wave of bullets as his perception of time slows down to a near standstill. This shows bullet timing is absolutely fodder to him. Percy moves on to solidify his place in the tiering of his verse, and that he is no pushover. Percy brawls with a Titan and takes multiple shots from him, getting right back up after. And the most impressive feat in the series from him, we see that Percy has the strength to momentarily bear the skies or the heavens. This feat is unquantifiable, but just imagine having to bear the entirety of the sky. It's absolutely insane. This measure of strength needed was even draining to gods and goddesses that attempted the same thing. In the next novel, Percy demonstrates that as long as he has traces of sea with him, he can summon a good amount of seawater to flood the battlefield. Percy shows an insane amount of durability as he tanks a point-blank volcanic eruption. Being ground zero meant that not only did he have to tank the heat, Percy had the tank being thrown hundreds of feet up and launched like a rag doll. Percy suffered no crazy damage from this encounter. Despite being injured throughout the beginnings of this book due to the ashes from Tartarus he has breathed in, Percy was still formidable as an opponent. He was able to flood a battlefield and crumple celestial bronze with the force of his water pressure, which is absolutely insane. As mentioned before, a lot of these feats were a nerfed Percy. Still, Percy was able to neg the goddess of violent storms at sea and match her power when it came to disrupting the sea and her attempts to harm both him and his friends. This is a sneaky feat coming up that might go unnoticed on the first pass through. Now, Percy was able to create a geyser with his shout. It was previously guessed in the novel that narratively it was unlikely even Poseidon could do that. This shows Percy may rival god-level power. Percy was able to successfully brawl with a giant and even manhandled its sword. A wounded Percy was able to stand off against a giant that was designed to be a threat to kill gods. This is insane given that Percy wasn't at 100% and he would mostly rely on skill in this one, which shows his prowess as a skilled fighter and perhaps one of the most underrated skilled fighters in history. Percy is so fast that at one point he drew his sword and slayed a monster before his companion Annabeth could even react properly. Percy was able, at one point, to tank multiple curses being placed upon him that affected him mentally, physically, and spiritually at the same time, and this did nothing to him. Percy surviving Tartarus alone is a crazy feat, given that the area is notorious for passively killing demigods. Percy at this point proves that his power is so minute to the point that he can manipulate essentially anything as long as water is somehow involved in its makeup. This includes poison vapor. An enraged Percy was capable of holding down a goddess in a pool of her own tears, and he was very capable of killing her. This shows that Percy does solidly scale above at least minor gods in power. Percy's battlefield-altering abilities allowed him to burst the vessels of blood in Tartarus and absolutely ragdoll armies and waves of Cyclops. Percy was capable of casually bodying a massive sea serpent with a mixture of acrobatics and water manipulation. In a random showing, we find out that Percy has the ability to see through illusions and fight off mental manipulation. Percy was capable of instantly changing water into solid material to support the weight of hundreds, if not thousands, of pounds. In the Son of Sobek crossover, we confirm that Percy is one of the strongest and most gifted fighters in the verse. Percy tanks shots that should kill him and absolutely thrashes avatars of combat, and highly touted combat magicians simply don't measure up to him. Percy is perfectly capable of creating chaotic hurricanes on the spot to terrorize his foes. As a duelist, Percy was capable of absolutely slaughtering an army of 150 plus monsters with his trusty Riptide, who didn't mention before, it's a pen that turns into a magic sword. Percy did so with his swordsmanship and combative instincts. Now amped at this point in his storyline by the curse of Achilles, Percy was capable of holding his own against the likes of Kronos and raw power. Kronos, of course, being one of the most renowned titans ever. In one of his most dominant performances to date, Percy absolutely thrashed Hyperion in a one-on-one fight. Hyperion should, based on lore, roughly scale to top hitters of the Titans, like Atlas himself. The Curse of Achilles amps your AP, durability, and somewhat your skill, as it also drains your stamina, which mentally Percy had to push through. One of the main characters, who has met some of the strongest non-god characters in the verse, notes that she believes that Percy is the strongest demigod ever. Percy was capable of surrounding himself with a powerful personal icy hurricane and could proceed to thrash high-tier Roman ghost platoons of former demigods. An exhausted Percy is still capable of manhandling a massive glacier. Percy dominated a giant that was designed to take down Poseidon himself in one-on-one combat. And finally, Percy was once again called the strongest demigod ever by a fellow demigod who had been around all of the main characters at that point. Anyways, guys, thank you for watching. If you grew up on this series as well, leave a like. Let me know in the comment section down below. If you're a Percy Jackson fan, let me know. If you want to see him in a versus battle, let me know as well in the comments. Anyways, thank you guys for watching. It's been your boy, your favorite villain, and I will see y'all later. Peace.